What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and you're here for another episode of the Facts Project. Today, special guest, Nigel Lynch. We are here to talk about not only Stray Dogs, The Wounded, episode 2. First of this issue that I basically got as a gift from this young man, Nigel Lynch here. But we are here to also talk about Critical Ops Task Force, which is now live on Kickstarter for Wise Acre Comics. Note that there is a past episode with Frederick Littles in the past, so if you have to, check that out. But glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No, absolutely, man. Look, now, for one, I say this again, thank you for the gift. It was great to read, and noting now that there is an expansion in this book makes it a little bit more worthwhile. Now, to talk about the story briefly, we're talking about the act of a certain case of mercenaries in a few of your books. Now, what brought you into the creation of this book, and what seems to be your detailed task in telling the story of a certain mercenary by the name of Shani Belcourt?
So I've been doing this for a while, and I always was a big fan of science fiction. So I wanted to do a science fiction based story. I wanted to branch out and do different genres. The first book I did was kind of a street drama set in the Caribbean. So I wanted to kind of break away from that and do something totally different. So I went with science fiction. And I always had this kind of infatuation with mercenaries, the mentality, the part, what they did in history. A lot of stuff they've changed the course of history from, let's say, from the Middle Ages, even when there was knights. A lot of knights were mercenaries, samurais, and there's mercenaries. So I was always infatuated with that. People killing for money and switching loyalties. So it's set in the Caribbean because I'm from the Caribbean, and it's set in the future. So I wanted to kind of set it where, what if there was a mercenary group from the Caribbean and the world was divided, where the world was divided into the first class nations and the third class nations. So in the book, they're called the pirate nations because they didn't sign a treaty to become a part of the greater world group. So they were just basically cast away. So that's the crux of the beginning of the universe. So that you kind of have that divided. You're seeing it from the point of view of lower nations or the Caribbean. And it was a little bit to do with me growing up in the 80s, where the world, for me, as close as we are in the Caribbean to the US, we were in two different worlds. We got technology 5 years later. We saw movies a year later, 2 years later, stuff like that. So it always felt like when you did travel to the United States, you was going to this amazing land. And that's kind of where I kind of set up my story from, where if we did separate, or there are parts of the world where we still have people living, like if they were living 100 years, and we still have people trying to get to Mars. That's the amazing thing where how the difference of this world is, you know what I mean? Got people struggling to probably eat, and there's somebody trying to get to Mars. So that's this kind of stuff I want to kind of focus on. I show the divide in the world in this story.
Got you. Now, when we come in reading book 1 of Stray Dogs, the description, and basically I would say in the first 10 pages of Shani, and in her details that she's not a mercenary at first. You know, she's more so she's in the military, and
she's in like she's kind of in private security.
Oh, okay. So it made it seem like the concept that she was more militarized than anything, especially her and her partner Martinez. Now, she seems like more of a free spirit, and she was hardlined on her decision making to where she figured out, I just wanted to do my time, and then when my time is up and my contract is up, however they felt like they wanted to subside how she was brought about, she was going to start her own thing. She wanted to go back home and pretty much take into the lessons that she's learned, possibly working in private security and starting up her own gang, which ends up being the Maroons that you see here in book 2. Now, how does this ultimately, because there's so many facets to this, so many themes. You have a black market aspect, which is a black market narrative, to where you see the passing of basically certain items that should not be deemed legal to purchase, but yet they're basically transported through couriers for money. And note, this is also in the future. So this is the dystopian future of 2137, I believe, in the books.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
like
around 2137. Yeah.
yeah, and the people that you even see just in regular time throughout the panels, they have separate body parts, limbs that are basically amputated and rebooted with robotics. Like this is now the world that we live in. Like the person who basically took on the courier spot pretty much had like a transport of currency brought to them in order for them to for the girl Rosa, who was the courier at that time,
Yeah.
to transport everything. And he had a missing limb. He had basically already an android type skull. So he was almost humanoid, half android in certain sense. But this is like kind of like the world that we live in now, to where robotics has now taken over somewhat of the, I guess, the medical aspect of how people are now living their lives. If something is cancerous or falling apart, you're now just replacing it with a robotic tool, whether it's an appendage or an internal organ.
Yes. That was very much sometimes as you do science fiction, you're kind of you're kind of projecting what you think the future would be, and also looking at how things are in your time. So one of the things that I had to kind of do, and the reason why it's set so far in the future, is because if you set things so close, we are almost every time we get there so quickly. So 2037 is just around the corner. It doesn't, you know what I mean? So
It's
it's
true.
like set it as far as possible, where you still have the freedom. And the beauty about technology is, so you will see as we go forward in time, we don't get rid of old technology.
Mm-hmm.
Technology coexists, old and new. There's still people probably with tube TVs. When you think of weapons, there's guns like the 1911, which was created in 1911, M6, the AK-47. So these guns don't go out of style. We still use technology once they're still working. So the concept of your story was to show the advancements, and then also to show that there would be certain things that aren't as advanced. Even the main character, she has a robotic eye, and
Yeah.
that has a very important part to do with the plot. So trying to make sure that all the things that I kind of mentioned or kind of have in the story, they have a payoff to
Right.
to come back in. Yeah.
Now, she kind of gets herself in a little bit of trouble, like in the first couple books, because not only the fact that she damn near gets killed, like in the first going into the second, but
Mhm.
she takes a piece of something that more than likely does not belong to her. And
Yeah.
she comes to understand that the people that are hunting her down are another mercenary group called the Golden Jackals. And one of their
Yes.
aspects is that they never forget, and they're pretty
Yeah.
much on the hunt for going forth. So it's kind of like going into the second book and into this book, it's like it's more now known that the Jackals are behind a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I'm going. So that was one of the things in writing the story. I wanted to make sure that just there's two goals I kind of had. One goal was to have it that if you read book one, it felt like a complete story. So when you read it and you end it, even though you may say, "Wow, I would love to read what happens next," you knew it had a beginning, middle, end. And
Yeah.
then the second book, you could read that book independently without knowing what happened in book one, feel as though it's a full story. So, but at the same time, you would notice there were certain threads that came through from book one into book two, like stuff that happened to her partner. She's kind of still dealing with that.
Right.
She's still hung up mentally. She's still hung up on the Jackals, and that's the only reason she kind of went and formed the Maroons to kind of for that future. So the going forward, I'm trying to pay off all of these aspects. So maybe by book three we'll have back in the Jackals again, or maybe in the book four. But so those are some of the aspects where I'm trying to do where you create the universe, but also try to remember everything and tie off those things so that the reader will feel satisfied that the chapters are dealt with, the different aspects, as you say.
Right, right. Now, and note, when you do read issue 2, like you probably don't see Shani until maybe like page 6 or page 8, because
Yeah,
of the fact that the one of the overlying intro plots of the second book is the fact that there is a young lady who's basically around with her children, but in the midst of all this, her possessions are being repossessed, and
yeah,
all of a sudden a package arrives for her kids, and her kids have now been like almost completely wiped clean by almost like an Oculus type technology that is now like almost like a VR, virtual
yeah,
reality type
yeah,
concept. They think it's a toy, but it ends up like brain manipulation, punishing them and throwing them directly into the hospital, to where it counteracts us now meeting Shani in real time,
yeah.
which also goes to that benefit. But when we get into the books, like we come to find out more about almost like why Shani wanted to go home, why she wanted to build her own team, and more so why now people from the island reach out to her. Even if she's too far, they'll go to her because they feel like she's a reliable person.
Yeah, yeah. The this story, as I said, it revolves around her, and the reason why it's called The Wounded is because she's dealing with a lot of the, if it's not physical,
Yep.
as in book 2, you will see something physical kind of happens. If it's not mental, emotional, so it's a very personal book around her, and as you said, the trying to make also the island and the setting a character, so so that when especially there's a lot more hopping in book 2, so you will find that every setting has like its own flavor from when they're in the, let's say, in the red light district versus like when they're on the racing circuit, versus from when in the Caribbean kind of thing,
Yeah.
and try to tie in all that kind of stuff. So it's very personal to her, and as you said, it when she's at home, I try to make it where when she's at home, it feels as though she's at home, and when she's away, she's at she feels as though she's distant,
Right.
kind of thing.
Now, if you could, there's a mysterious antagonist in the second book, Mr. Lynn.
Mm. Yes.
So, like, if you could describe him, because he seems like somebody that is very calm in his approach and yet can be
Mm.
completely diabolical. Why did you come up with
So
the creation of this character?
okay, so there's two characters that kind of tie in as Hammer and Lynn, and it's not really a spoiler, but the idea behind these characters are we live in a world right now where there's a lot of corporate crime, where we live in a world where supervillains are people who like you heard the Theranos thing with the lady who was doing the blood scam thing. Every day we hear about things with NFTs and rug pulls and all kind of stuff. So I kind of wanted to set it where the person in the story who were the shady characters were with somebody on that level, right? And what it was, the ish, what I wanted to do too was, even though these people are cold people, they still have a way to get it, which is your family. So Lynn and Hammer were two people who kind of did some shady stuff, and as you said, they kind of was getting their stuff repossessed and they're on the brink of bankruptcy, but they kind of crossed the wrong people. So then those people went after their kids. So therefore now at the stage they're at, they had to reach out to Shani to get help. And the way how the story is set up, we don't know if Lynn is dirty or not. I try to
Right.
present him as being clean,
Mm-hmm.
but then as it goes forward, you realize that he was as dirty as his partner because he still signed off on some of this stuff. And you know, I try to do things like show there's a part in there where they did acts of kindness towards certain groups and certain countries, but it was almost as though it was done for guilt. Uh, like because remember, it was through their technology that the people were affected and they lost limbs and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I try to when I try to write a story, I try to do A story and a B story. I try to do different levels so that if you kind of read it, you will pick up stuff that you didn't pick up the first time. and if you read it again, you'll see little Easter eggs and things like that.
Mm. Now, how does this correlate into this newest book that's live on Kickstarter? Already funded, by the way. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. It's set in the same world, and the COTF book is 10 years in the past compared to Diary of Stray Dogs. But that was really the characters in that book were supposed to be the original stars that I was thinking of doing. But what happened was I was working on the original project, and through different timing schedules, the books kind of got delayed. So in the spare time, I started to do Diary of Stray Dogs. Shani's a character that was also in the COTF books. In the future, but I decided to, well, let me go back since I had time and do the origin story of these characters. So
Mm-hmm.
COTF is the origin of a character called Douglas St. James, and he's a super soldier, badass mercenary with nanobots. And the tone of that book is a totally different. That's like a 80s action, like as I like to describe it, is almost like Extinction meets the Raid. It's that kind of high energy kind of thing. And the artist, uh, he worked on a book with Chris Moses.
Chris Mo.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Saturn Effect. That team that worked on Saturn Effect, that's the same guy, and they did a brilliant job. When I saw his work, I kind of wrote a story around to capture that style that he has. He has that kind of energy, that kind of like real crazy style. So I wrote a story that kind of like dealt with his pluses and what he's good at. So that's how we ended up coming up with the COTF book. But I always had the COTF as characters within this universe.
Right.
And they're even mentioned in the Diary of Stray Dogs. And I try to tie, so you will also see characters in the COTF book that appear in the Diary of Stray Dogs, but they would be 10 years younger, or you'd say, hey, I know that guy. He's the guy that did such and such. So I try to tie them in, but little Easter eggs.
Now, is it so the company, that private security company that we saw in issue 1 of Stray Dogs, is more so detailing the early beginnings of the COTF?
No, that's just to introduce Shani and to show her her role. So her strength was is that she was a pilot. She was just a
Right.
pilot.
Right.
So right, and what she wanted to do was when she retired was to go back to the Caribbean and be a pilot and courier people from island to island and rich people who come down, just kind of do that kind of stuff. But it was only with crossing the Jackals did she then think of really jumping into the mercenary game
Mm.
seriously because of the stuff that she kind of lost and knowing how serious these golden jackals would be.
Right. Now, of course, with COTF, we get a whole brand new set of characters that are brought into this book. Please, if you would, if you could describe, rattle off who we should see as a part of this brand new team.
Right. So the team is they're called the Red Team, and they're led by Douglas St. James. He's a leader, and he's also from Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I try to represent Caribbean characters. And then there's a guy called Tyler McPherson, and he's the guy with the axe. And there's a newbie to the team called Jess. And there are two other members. Uh, they are background characters for now, but they all have different personalities. So when writing the team, especially a team book, it's all about balancing. Everybody can't be the focus of every story. So this
Right.
first story kind of focuses on Douglas, Tyler, and Jess. And Jess being a new member to the team is kind of that window for the reader to get information, and she will ask you questions and she'll be that naive person. And as the stories go on, we will learn more about the team. We'll see about the mental state of these characters too, because they're more psychopaths. They're more like they're more jaded. They're more jaded characters because, as again, to do with the medical experiments they've been going through, the amount of like wars and the different atrocities they've kind of seen, that a certain part of them has kind of shut off. So the character Jess, being new to this, we'll see if she will become corrupted or if she will pull some of them out of that mentality, if she will cause them to regain their humanity. So there's an underlying story underneath just the action and the craziness. I try to
Right.
do two stories at the same time.
Almost like I guess a deep dive into the psychosis of a lot of
Mhm.
military members. Me myself, I was in the Air Force myself. So um just being I guess the Jess's character being someone who's new to the fold and is almost understanding a sort of shell shock herself, because you got two people that she now has to work with that are just maniacal in their approach and how they determine themselves into running things. And Jess at this point has to just go along with it. You know,
Yeah.
if I gotta, like, if they're running in the fire, I think I'm gonna have to too. You know,
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
almost in that aspect. But also, and again, this is a collaborative piece. So your company, Beyond Caribbean Publishing, decides to align itself with Wiseacre Comics in the
Yes.
distribution of this particular book. Also, in that collaboration is the distribution of Stray Dogs 1 and 2. Now, how did this come about? Of course, with Frederick
Mhm.
Littles, with Magnus, with Crisis coming out, that I'm sure is going to be in my hands shortly. But he's somebody that is that of course has been new to the field in the past year or so, and
Yeah.
ultimately something happened to where you guys had a chat.
Yeah. We kind of met on Facebook. When I first met him, this was a little bit before Magnus was released. And in one of the forums, he was saying, does anybody want to read my comment and give me some feedback? And I was like, sure, I'd read it. And he sent me a very rough draft. It was so rough. The the artwork and the dialogue were together. The dialogue was one document, artwork was not document.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of went through it and I really enjoyed it. And I kind of gave him some honest feedback. And being sometimes in the indie space, and you sometimes don't think that your feedback will matter, especially to someone you think is ahead of you. But he actually came back, we spoke, and we really had a long conversation, and he really took what I said to heart. And that kind of went and that passed. But a couple months later, I was looking for someone to collaborate with in order to get my books. It would be easier to get my books published in the States if I was working with a US based company, because from working from the Caribbean, it's not that easy. We're not allowed to do certain sites and different things like that. So to try to circumvent some of that, I said, well, what if I submit? And I reached out to him when I realized there's a guy called, I can't remember his name now. He's the writer of the book with the two sons of Thor. Uh, I'm really horrible with names. I
Oh,
reached out to him. Um, Magnus and Moody. He has a book called. He was on your show, but I reached out to this guy and he said, "Why don't you talk to Frederick Littles?
yeah,
He will, And I kind of went put anything. But when I sent that email, he popped right back out in Facebook and said, "Hey, you want to do a book? You want to say?" And he was ready. And he was always being supportive, and he liked the book. He really loved it, and that's how we ended up. Even I was even surprised where it was like, as you said, a cool feature where it still has the Beyond label on it. Because sometimes when you do publish with other people, it will fall straight directly underneath just their branding. So he's been very, very helpful. He's been a real force in getting me to get this stuff published.
right.
And I really enjoy working. And through him too, I was able to collaborate and do some work on Crisis and some other
Nice.
things, So that's what I really love about the indie community. When it really gets going and the collaborations and stuff, it's really beautiful.
Absolutely. Now, in speaking of such, you're somebody that does not live in the States, and yet you are an indie publisher and an indie creator. What has been your desire in doing comic books out there in Barbados? Is there any comic books
Um,
out there?
I'll, yeah, there's tons of comic books over here, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I've actually worked on. I've been doing this for 17 years, so
Wow.
I've probably, yeah, I've probably written over, I would say, roughly 20 comic books. Yeah, I've
Mm,
worked on about 20 comic books. This is from working with the U.S. Embassy. This is working on independent books. I published a book with Abrams. So I've been around. I've done stuff. For me, I always wanted to do comic books. It was always a passion. I was
yeah.
reading comic books from the time I was 4. I can remember the first book I ever had. It was a Spider-Man. So it was always, but there was a lull in between there where I kind of stepped away. But then I came back like 17 years, and I was like, I want to do this. Let me, put pen to paper. And I started to write. So yes, there is a scene, but with every scene, there's always another place that you can venture out to.
Right.
So that's where I ended up going. So like where I was here doing this for 17 years, I never really stepped into the US market. So then when I came into US market, it was like starting over again kind of thing.
Hmm.
But there's so much the good thing about it is you never could lose experience. So still using that experience, still knowing how to write, storytelling, those things never leave you. So you just kind of turn them into and use them now when you go forward kind of thing.
Right, right. Now, what if you could, because you probably have a comic book shop out there in Bridgetown. Well, what is your
Yeah.
go-to place out there?
A place called Anime Spot. That's the number one comic books place here in Barbados.
Really? Now,
Yeah, yeah,
this is in the capital. This is in Bridgetown.
yeah. It's in Bridgetown. It's in Bridgetown.
Mm,
Things kind of change. Growing up, you could get a comic book anywhere. You could get a comic book at the gas station, you could get a
oh yeah,
supermarket.
it was like that
Yeah,
around
as
here
time
too.
went, yeah, yeah, it was like that. It was like you could have gone to any person's house, and if you dug up, you could find a comic book, or
Hmm.
somebody could give you a comic book to read. As a kid, that was something that everybody was given to read. Here, read this comic book. As it went forward, that's where you kind of had this whole thing with comic shops and stuff because you you can't get them like you could have before, you know.
It's true.
So yeah, so it's either online now or comic shop kind of thing. And being that Barbados is a smaller island, you
Mhm.
will find that there's not as many comic shops because the sustainability wouldn't make sense to have 5 comic shops because already comics is a very niche hobby in
Hmm.
itself. Yeah.
Got you. Now, as far as the books that you've created so far, you've had your terms of jumping into sci-fi, almost in a sci-fi action adventure type of comic. Is there any other genres that you feel like you want to explore?
I can tell you what I've done. I've done crime drama. I've done science fiction. I've done uh, kind of like local folklore, which
Hmm.
would kind of be fantasy, Caribbean fantasy. So I don't know
Okay.
if you're familiar with things like Bakus, Duppies, and that kind of stuff. Very Caribbean, Heartman, those kind of
Yeah,
fantasy
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I've done that kind of stuff. Um, the only thing I would say that uh, I'm a person I would just say that if you came to me with a project, I wouldn't say no. I would
Okay.
try it. I would try. I've tried. I've tried. I've been approached to turn a screen literal play into a comic book, and I did it.
Hmm.
So it's I just try put my brain to it and just do it. So I don't say someone somewhere along the line I learned well. Don't say no to the work. Just try it. You never
Yeah.
know what can happen.
Now you were talking about before that you've actually created comics for the embassy.
Yeah, I work with the
How did
U.S.
that come
Embassy
about?
here. Yeah, so we have one convention here every year, and it was partly kind of sponsored by the U.S. Embassy.
Mm.
And the liaison at the time, he was a big comic book fan. So he really kind of enjoyed the work that we were doing. And he keeps saying to me all the time, or kept saying to me all the time, I want to work with you guys. I want to work with you guys. And this is something that you kind of hear all the time. People promising and saying, well, hey, we should do something. And one day he called me and said, well, look, I wanted to do a book for the embassy and I want to deal with certain, come up with the social topics and stuff. So I did 3 books with them, one on bullying in schools, one with domestic abuse, and one of human trafficking.
Mm.
And right, so those were full color 30-page books. And the US Embassy distributed them throughout the islands for free. So that was a really great experience working with the US Embassy. It opened a lot of doors.
Now, as far as like, was that like your first, I guess, collaboration in doing something that was sort of pseudo in the States?
Yes, that was the
Okay.
first.
Got you.
Yeah, that was first. Yeah.
Now, going forward, now this series now is just an issue 2. You talked about doing books 3 and 4, and also even in the collaboration of this project with COTF, as far as like propelling that forward. This is now one collective universe. How far could this go?
Um, it could go pretty far. Planned, I have planned to do 5 books with DCOTF,
Mm-hmm.
and with the Dairy Stray Dogs, I am writing book 3 now,
Mm-hmm.
and book 3 would finish this arc. And depending on how things go, I will then jump into the second arc. And the second arc would be basically dealing with the Jackals. The Jackals will come back. So
Wow.
this next book, the Jackals will not come back, but it will lay the groundwork for her facing the Jackals in this big standoff.
Got you. Now,
Yeah.
what has been the reception? Not necessarily here, but when you first released Stray Dogs, when you had your first issue, and as far as like basically self-publishing and self-distribution of your comic in Barbados, what was that like?
The reception was good. We have a we have a we have a kind of a fan base here, and we have a convention every year. So basically, that's when you get to meet and greet. The feedback was really good. People loved the character of Shani. People said when it ended the first time, a lot of people was like, "I want more. What happens next?" kind of thing, and that kind of encouraged me to do the second book because
Yeah.
it was supposed to be a one shot. That's it was supposed to be a one shot, just something that I was doing in my spare time. Because I remember that it was a filler book while I was waiting for something else to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just to kind of show her origin. But everybody was like, I want more of this character. And writing the character, I kind of fell in love with the character myself.
Right.
So I wanted to, I started to explore what would she become or what would happen to her, and then introduce the rest of the characters. So even with the some of the US creators and some of the people who read it, a lot of people really enjoyed the book. People ask me why I killed off certain characters. To this day, people kind of like are upset because a lot of people love certain characters. And the
You
thing that
do.
kind of really, yeah, some of the things that kind of really surprised me was the amount of people who loved Rosa.
It's
This
true.
was,
You didn't expect that.
I did not expect that. I did not expect that. So it's been as I said, I usually tell people, yes, you're doing comic books to sell, but you're doing them also for yourself because there's no guarantee that you will strike it big. So you kind of got to do it and have fun with it. You got to be doing this. Part of you has to be doing this for yourself. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the books I've written were because I saw a gap in the market where I wanted to do something. So for instance, you've read a lot of indie books. I'm sure you've never read a book like this.
I haven't.
right. Because so I wanted to put that in there. You know what I mean? I could have done another superhero book. I could have done another, I don't know, Frankenstein book, but I wanted to do something that I would want to read that was a little different. And I've even had people remark and say it was kind of refreshing. It felt like a palate cleanser to read something from the indie space that was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at the same time, you kind of have to have fun with it. You have to kind of enjoy it. You have to kind of enjoy the processes, the good, the bad, artists skipping out, different things. There's so much. It's an adventure to produce a book, especially the Direct Straight Outs to a book of that size. That was a task.
I can imagine. Well, sir, as far as the comic right now, COTF, I believe if I last time I checked, it was like maybe around like 19 days left in the campaign.
It's about 12 now.
Wow. Okay, I'm way off.
Yes. It's
so,
about 12.
so 12 days left in the campaign. You already basically
Mhm.
broke funding. Stretch goals are pretty much already, I'm going to guess, manifesting themselves.
Yeah.
And this pretty much should get in everybody's hands by.
We're saying December, but maybe
Okay.
before because all the books are finished. There's nothing left to be done. All the artwork is done. You have a physical copy, so it's
I do.
you can that's just
I
done.
don't have COTF, but I
Um,
have that. Yes.
yeah, yeah. You're probably one of 5 people in the US that have
I'm glad. I'm happy to have it.
that.
All right.
Yes, yeah. So yeah. So we're saying December. And I don't really foresee any delays because it'll be as soon as the campaign starts, do fulfillment
Mhm.
and get the books out.
That's great. Nigel, this was amazing. I appreciate you taking the time with me all the way from Barbados. It's definitely refreshing to, of course, have people who we have not seen before that also take on the love of indie comics and then basically embolden them in their own type of stories. So this is great.
Thank you.
I absolutely, I wish you the best and how you've been able to put this together and basically COTF for everybody to see. It's definitely a good move in the right direction, and I believe that Mr. Littles has not steered you wrong. He's doing a great job by you and basically plugging you with us over here in the U.S. market. And looking forward to a lot more of this. The
Thank
issue
you. Thank you.
3 and hopefully with COTF more issue 2, 3, 4 going forth. But it's been great. So thank you again.
No problem, man. No problem.
All
I
right.
really
So
appreciate you having me on the show.
absolutely. So from James Grandmaster Facts voice, Nigel Lynch, Beyond Caribbean Publishing, you can get Stray Dogs 2, The Wounded, and COTF live on Kickstarter right now. That's Critical Ops Task Force for Wiseacre Comics. You'll see that on Kickstarter. Issue 1 is out right now. So for all of us at the Facts Project, we are out.